Okay, so back to Campbell's Smoking Lyrical Tale Slide series, man. We're continuing with Aesop Rock's album. We're only doing 9 tracks on that album. I think we're on the 4th one. I think the first one was actually an intro, so we're probably on the 3rd track over here. This one's called Living Curfew. I actually wanted to drop this a few days ago. I wanted to react to it a few days ago, but unfortunately I wasn't able to. And Aesop is one of those kind of artists that you really have to be in that mind space to react to, because his reactions are often like 45 minutes to an hour, and there's a lot to break down and stuff like that. It's not like other reactions where you just turn on, react, say what you got to say. It's just there's so much to break down, and if you're not in that mind space, and if something's happening during the day that's kind of throwing you off a little bit, you're like, oh, like, you know, to actually sit down for an hour and to focus on something like this sometimes can get a bit hard. So I apologize about that, but let's continue, man. This one over here, like I said, Living Curfew. Let's see what we've got. Let's continue. I've got the lyrics, obviously. There's no sort of visualizer or video here. We're just going to have to listen carefully, but I've also got the lyrics over here to follow along. And you know how we do. We listen to it first, and then afterwards we go into it verse by verse, and we break it down line by line, as you know. Let's rock and roll. Let's see what we got. Living Curfew. Let's go.
Golden hours like mom tripping. You come down here right this instant. Sits on a front step, chips in a sunk is dumb for a sunk is brick the pick. When I click, it's difficult to pick one. I depict the wisdom in a particular condition, like plain old birds on the same old foo fight. Rebranded and draped in a good light. Boat break from a day at the bullfight. All to come pray in the radiant bullseye. I don't blame y'all, the force awakens on Flatbush Avenue, forest bathing. Blood pressure ain't a touch extra. My cholesterol back to nothing special. Skin clear and my legs strong, and my spine fused and migraine gone, and bodega spangled in a mere 35 octillion lumens at a low angle through incense smoke from a folding table. It's basically nature's stolen cable till it ain't. Time is a pick to the ice. Right when you chillin', it be chippin' at the vibe. Most tip a hat and slip into the high, but I dip into the grid. Rats sniffing out the mines like. Bulls like pop wild, and it's coming in hot, trying not to fight it. That helicopter, that 5-0 siren, CB squawking, Bombitos vice grips. I mean Brian Eno mixtape, an ego lifeless, adrift in the eye of the side quest. Sign me, please don't feed the wildlife unless on me to mislead the night shift. Sun is railway and kanji, or I've lust from the brush pen of Kim Jong G swirling. Junkyard tires, love seats, and house pet sauce web governor. One beast to love, y'all. Bring her adult teeth and move in the lulls. A pulse and a juice with the pulp. Midnight pushing up, seeing calamari. Birds little long man, what army, huh? Lows a weeper in the wheat hour, speaking I'm low in the ether. I could see him in a earth tone low hat and throwback shoes like I saw at Easter. I could bounce ideas off an angel, a demon, or any other brand of Cthulhu. I could rinse in the ambient wind, but I can't relate the intangibles to
crystals in the handle of my hammer to the amber light. Crystals in the handle of my hammer to the amber light. Crystals in the handle of my hammer to the amber light. Crystals in the handle of my hammer to the amber light.
I walk the city strictly witching hours, feeling dangerous, feeling like I gave you power. Trees rustling, they sleep, wildlife scurry to feed it to light on in the tower. Shadows moving, the deep smile, rows of redundant teeth, they can see you's a coward. Street lamps is buoys and oceans of black. I'm swimming on my back, the moon buddy, yellow piece of crack in the firmament. Peering to the dark Copernicus, fellow travelers past tense, wondering if it's our turn in the tournament. Every morning on the steps with my little herb. Every morning a mad woman come through feeding the birds. Walking crazy fast, tossing fistfuls of bread. Might as well be feeding the rats, but the rats already well fed. Fentanyl in the pack, if they could, they'd come back from the dead and buy it again. I remember when nights was ambulance sirens, watching them put bodies inside them. Sometimes somebody outside wilding on empty streets, dead silent, half empty stores scared to breathe. I sit on steps now with my little weed. I walk the long way around the jacks, them brothers looking a little lean. I'm taciturn on the strip, I get my shit turned and I leave. Pachyderm, I never forget the faces of thieves. Head full of worms, some days it's bees. Some mornings the air feels clean. I can see her coming, trundling down the block. Then stop, pick the dead bird off the curb, stuffed it in her bag. Teeth barely bared when she hurried past.
Oy, oy. Okay. Wait. Okay. Before we even get back into that. Okay, so what I'm thinking about over here is that this is actually just reminiscing. It's actually going back to their childhood. I don't know who the other guy is. He actually had on the third verse. It was a pretty sick verse, though. I must be honest. It was a very cool verse. But I think it's like, where's he from, though? I think he's from New York, if I'm not mistaken. I think Aesop Rock is from New York, and I think he's kind of painting that picture. He's kind of going back to his childhood, where he's kind of reminiscing, obviously, the days of his mom, and then he's reminiscing the nightlife. And I think he's painting, I think he's kind of painting two different worlds over here. So he's painting the inside world where he was quite like sheltered and safe because his parents, made him sort of sheltered and safe. He had a place to stay and whatever else. And when you're a child, you kind of see that very differently. These are two very different worlds. They don't seem like it's one world. And as you grow older, it's like almost it's how you transition from that world of safety out into the street, and you realize how cruel and dark the world can really be. And I think the actual track progresses in that particular way, right? Where it starts off with his mom and she's baking the bread, and the bread's on the windowsill and stuff like that. And then it goes through that sort of transition, and then and the way he's actually playing with it is it's almost like it's going from daylight into darkness, and it's almost like it's almost like the metaphor for life, right? So it starts off like when you're a child, everything is great and everything is beautiful and daffodils and stuff like that because you're quite sheltered from the real world, but the real world was always outside. You just never really saw it. All you really did is like literally as you grew up, you walked out. You walked out of the safety of your parents' sort of nest. And as you walked out, you tend to see the real world, right, for yourself and what it is, right? And you were always guarded from it with your parents. Your parents would always play it in a different light because obviously they didn't want to tell you that, as a child, you would never understand it. So I think that's the kind of idea we're going with over here. And I think it plays quite well into the whole concept of this in terms of like the ITS, the integrated tech solutions and stuff like that, because he touches on that in terms of the tech over here in terms of video games and stuff like that. So he's kind of like looking backwards, essentially. In the first track, he kind of speaks about how we go all the way back, right? We go all the way back in terms of our evolution and stuff like that. And now he's kind of like panned that into his own life, right? And he's going back to his childhood. And that's at least my initial thought. But anyway, let's just you know how we do. Let's just open this up and let's go at this bit by bit, and we'll see if we can break things down a little better. Okay, let's rock and roll. Let's see what we've got here. Let's go.
Golden hours like mom tripping. You come down here right this instant. Sits on a front step, chips in a sunk is dumb for a sunk is brick a pickman. I click, it's difficult to pick one. I depict the wisdom in a particular condition like plain old birds on the same old foo fight. Rebranded and draped in a good light. Boat break from a day at the bullfight. All to come pray in the radiant bullseye. I don't blame y'all, the force awakens on Flatbush Avenue, forest bathing. Blood pressure ain't a touch extra. My cholesterol back to nothing special. Skin clear and my legs strong and my spine fused and my green gone and bodega spangled. In a mere 35 octillion lumens at a low angle through incense smoke from a folding table. It's basically nature's stolen cable till it ain't. Time is a pick to the ice. Right when you chillin', it be chippin' at the vibe. Most tipper hadn't slippin' to the high, but I dip into the grid. Rats are sniffing out the mines like.
Okay, so this over here, let's start from the very beginning. Okay, so over here it says golden hours like mom tripping. All right. So I kind of feel like when he's talking about golden hour, he's talking about sunset, right? So the sun is setting. You come down here, right? This instance, obviously they're in their room doing something, and it's mother's like, come down here, right? This is, I don't know if they're fighting over something or something like that. And the mother's like, okay, she's had enough of it. Says, come down here, right? This instance, or come down to like eat or something. Sits on the front step, chips and sun-kissed. Sits on the front steps, chip and sun-kissed, dumb for sun-kissed brick or Pikmin. Dumb for a sun-kissed brick or Pikmin. I don't know if he's actually talking about, in terms of that, is actually like a loaf of bread. So like literally she's baked something and she's left it out on the windowsill for it to like cool down. And that, I think that's what he's trying to refer to as a brick. Right, I'm not entirely sure. I click. It's difficult to pick one that depict the wisdom of the particular condition. I think when he's talking about click, it's difficult to pick one. I think he's talking about his game, right? And those old games, those anachronistic games where it's like you had to pick certain characters and you didn't really know which one to pick as a child, essentially. Then, like the plain old birds in the same old food fight. Plain old birds. See, over here, he might be playing to that bread over there, or he might be playing to the actual video game character. I'm not entirely sure, right? Because if you said plain old birds, so this one's like plain old birds, is he playing that against like the Angry Birds of today? I'm not entirely sure, right? Where back in the day, they were just simple. They were very simple characters and everything was like pixelated and very simple. Rebranded and draped in the good light. Folk break from a day at the bullfight. That, I think he's kind of just depicting that he was fighting with his friends, so he had to take over a game or whatever else. So the bullfights, I also kind of think is like they were actually playing a fighting game, I think. All to come pray in the radiant bullseye. Okay, so I kind of feel like, okay, that's him just depicting that they're coming down. They're coming down to the kitchen or wherever the mom is. And then I don't blame y'all. The Force Awakens, the Flatbush Avenue forest bathing. I think he's literally just trying to say where he lived, maybe the street that he was on. Blood pressure ain't a touch extra. Obviously, when he's a child, he doesn't have to worry about that. He's kind of trying to play that where now my blood pressure is high, but then my blood pressure wasn't a touch extra. My cholesterol back to nothing special, because when you're a child, you don't really care about your cholesterol. It's nothing special, right? Only when you get older do you care about your blood pressure, you care about your cholesterol. So he's really sort of reminiscing. It's really nostalgic for him. It's like, you think about where you are today from a health perspective, from a mental perspective, from a career perspective, and things like that. And then you go back and it's like, fuck, I wish, when I was, and you often sort of play that in your mind, just when I was a child, I never had to worry about cholesterol. When I was a child, I never had to worry about my blood pressure. Do you know what I mean? So he really is taking you through that trip as a child where things were just easier, right? And those sorts of things. That's why I like the way he actually said over here, skin clear, legs stronger, cholesterol back to nothing special. It was those kind of things you never had to think of. You wish you could go back to those days when you never had to think about those things. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, skin clear, legs stronger, and my spine fuse and migraine gone, right? So spine fuse, I'm not entirely sure if he's talking about a medical condition over there, or if he's talking about like, maybe now he has like a slip disc, but back then when he was a child, his spine was like, fused, it's like strong. Usually when you speak about spine being fused, it's usually not a good thing. It's like a medical thing that you'd have to take care of. But I think what he's trying to say over here is that his spine wasn't giving him problems. His spine was actually brand new, essentially, and he never had a headache, right? So again, just playing back to how everybody plays back to like their childhood. When they were kids, you never had to worry about any of these problems. You never had any of these problems, right? The Bodega Spangled in a mere 35 the Bodega Spangled in a mere 35 octillion lumens at low angle. I mean, that's a pretty creative way of actually saying that the sun is just shining. I think that's what he's trying to say, because obviously the measurement of light is in lumens. So if the way you measure light is in lumens, 35 octillion lumens, I'm not entirely sure how many lumens the sun is, but there's nothing on this earth that is sort of has got that amount of lumens, right? No light on Earth has got that amount. So he's got to be talking about the sun over here, 35 octillion lumens at a low angle, right? So, okay, I get it. Okay, he actually is talking about the sun because it's 35 octillion lumens, which means the sun, right? Is it 35 octillion lumens? Is it that? I don't know. Anyway, and obviously he's basically saying the sun is setting, so the sun is at a low angle and the octillion lumens is basically shining across the streets and the city or whatever else. Through incense smoke from a folding table. Very cool. I like that thing over there because it's kind of like he's talking about sort of like the smoke, but he could be talking about the smoke in the city and there's like a certain scent to it, or he's talking about that literally inside his home itself, right? It's basically nature's stolen cable. That's a fucking amazing line, right? Because the sun is basically nature's stolen cable, right? In the sense that it's like always there. It's always providing power, right? There's always current running through it. I think that's very, very, very cool way to describe the sun. Till it ain't. When he says till it ain't, so obviously until it sets. Time is a pick to the ice. That's very fucking cool. I like that, right? So time is a pick to the ice. It's like chipping away. So time is always like chipping away at life, essentially, right? And I'm not entirely sure if he's trying to refer to it in terms of ice, in terms of life being cold, or if he might be referring to like when he might be referring to. If I'm actually thinking about it, he's talking about it from when he was a child, right? And as a child, like you're chilling, playing TV games and chilling in ice, and then time is a pick to the ice, right? Because now it's, now that's got to come to an end, right? I'm not entirely sure if he's playing into that. And maybe it could be a bar, could be even a triple where he's playing into a TV game as well, but I don't think so. I think it's literally, till it ain't, time is let's just say it's chipping away at life. Okay, that's the easiest way to go about that. Right when you're chilling, you see. I talk about the chilling, so it might be playing into the ice and the chilling. Right when you're chilling, it'd be chipping at the vibe. I literally should have just read one line on, that literally was that's exactly what I was thinking of. Most tip a hat and slip into the hive. That's a very nice way of saying it's like, okay, cool, it's night time, good night to the world, and I'm going to slip into my little hive. I'm going to slip into my home, essentially. But I dip into the grid, rat sniffing out the mines. So when he says, that's actually very clever. So most, when it comes nighttime, say, okay, cool, I'm off, I'm going home, I'm dipping into the hive. But he's like, I'm dipping into the grid. Right? Meaning I'm coming out, and the grid meaning obviously the grid, the network and the grid of the city, essentially. Very cool. I dip into the grid, rat sniffing out the mines. That's very cool. So when he goes out, it's like all the rats and all those things, specifically in like the city life, come out to like the dumpster areas and shit like that. So it's really descriptive in the way he's actually writing that. Very, very, very cool. Now let's go into the next verse. Hopefully I got that one right, but it doesn't seem too cryptic. All right, so it's quite creative, pretty well written, but it doesn't seem too cryptic. I think I've got the gist of it though. Let's go.
It's like like pop wild and it's coming in hot, trying not to fight it. That helicopter, that 5-0 siren, see me squawking, buy me those vice grips. I mean Brian Eno mixtape, my ego lifeless, adrift in the eye of the side quest. The sign read, please don't feed the wildlife unless don't meet to mislead the night shift. Sun is railway and Kanji or I've lust from the brush paddock, Kim Jung G swirling. Junkyard tires, love seats and house pet sauce web cover. One beast to love, y'all. Bring her adult teeth and move in the lows. A pulse and a juice with the pulp. Midnight pushing up, seeing Katamari. Birds little long man, what army, huh? Lows a weaver in the wheat hour speaking, I'm low in the ether. I could see him in a earth tone low hat and throwback shoes like I saw at Easter. I could bounce ideas off an angel, a demon, or any other brand of Cthulhu. I could rinse in the ambient wind, but I can't relate the intangibles to you.
Okay. So let's go into, so now it's kind of like he's kind of out into the real world, right? And I think he's playing this in two different ways. I think he's playing this in terms of like when he was a kid, and then when he's an adult, essentially, in terms of like the way he represents daylight and the way he represents nighttime, in terms of like he sees the real world for what it is, essentially. And he's kind of just playing it in terms of how he's just reminiscing. Even it almost sounds like this is a teenager, essentially. So he just reminisces the streets, all right? From and he's painting the morning picture where he's inside his home, and then he paints the nighttime picture where he decides to go outside his home. So obviously he is a teenager. So this over here, Nightfall, is like pop willing. It's coming in hot. Try not to fight it. I like that. It's very cool. It's just basically just try not to fight you can't fight the nightfall. It is what it is. The helicopter, that 5-0 sirens, those are just the normal sounds that you hear in the streets. It's the ambulances, the helicopter flying overhead, right, looking for something, or just surveilling or something like that. CB squawking, find me those vice grips. I think when he's talking about the CB, I think CB is talking about a radio, right? We've heard that before in terms of a CB being a radio, right? So you hear the radio in the distance, and I think when he's actually saying CB squawk, a very descriptive way of actually saying that. So it's like a radio that's actually squawking there in the distance, right? And it kind of feels like the frequency is always changing, essentially. So it's like, find me those vice grips. Actually, it's a very nice way of writing that. I'll tell you why. Because I actually kind of feel like he's walking past like a mechanic shop, essentially, where they fix cars. So you hear the radio over the radio playing in the corner over there, and then a guy telling obviously his apprentice or somebody who say, "Oh, hand me those vice grips," essentially. But the way he wrote it into this, in terms of the CB squawking, in terms of the radio trying to find the right frequency, and then find me the vice grips, is kind of like to say there could be another meaning over there that says find me the vice grips, in terms of like, so I can actually grip onto one frequency and keep it there. Do you know what I mean? I'm not entirely sure. That might be a bit of a stretch, but it's just if you actually think about that. But I just think quite simply he's just walking past like a chop shop or something like that, and you hear the radio in the corner and a guy just saying, "Oh, hand me those vice grips," to his helper or his apprentice or whatever it is. I mean, Brian Eno, I don't know who Brian Eno, mixtape and Ego, Lifeless, which obviously this is just what's playing on the radio, I'm assuming. Drift in the Eye of the Side quest. That's very cool, because it's almost like he's on a quest. So it's a drift in the eye of the side quest. He just notices that from his peripheral vision. I think that's very cool. The sign read, "Please don't feed the wildlife, unless throwing meat to mislead the night, unless throwing meat to mislead the night shift." So don't feed the wildlife, sure, unless throwing meat to mislead the night shift. I think when he's talking about maybe that's just the stray animals, like the stray cats or the stray dogs, right? Like you want them to get away from you. So you're like, oh, well, yeah, let me just throw something in the corner over there so that they can just like stay there. You know what I mean? So to mislead them so that they're not following you. I think that might be, you might be saying that. Son, this is a whirlwind country. Absolutely. That's a nice way of just saying, yeah, well, fucking life's tough, specifically in the cities, specifically today, that's for sure. A world flushed from the brush pen of Kim Jong-gi. I think Kim Jong-gi is something to do with anime. I think he might be an animator of sorts, if I'm not mistaken. Kim Jong-gi. I think it might be a world flushed from the pen of the Kim Jong-gi. I actually think he might be an animator, and I think it's a South Korean animator that does that anime. I think it's got something to do with anime over there. So it's kind of like he's basically saying like that kind of world. It's almost like it was painted by an anime artist, essentially. It's a very descriptive way of saying that, which is pretty cool. I love y'all. Bring your adult teeth and move in the lulls. A pulse in the juice with the pulp. Just trying to think about that line over there. Oh wait, sorry, I even missed a line. Swirling junkyard tires and love seats. Okay, cool, perfect. That's very cool. Swirling junkyard tires. So there's obviously tires that have already been used, that have been taken off cars, and they're just sitting there, and then people are actually sitting on them. So it's literally like two people, a boyfriend and a girlfriend, using them as a seat, right? And they're just talking to each other. And then, and house pets all swept up into one beast. That's pretty cool. I fucking love that. So it's like all the house pets that are shedding. It's like they sweep up all of the fur and then they sort of push it into one corner. But I like the way he says all swept up into one beast, because it's almost like it's all the fur of all these different house pets all put together. So it's like multiple little beasts, but like sort of swept up into one beast, right? That's very clever. And then I love y'all bring your adult teeth and move in. So obviously it's just the teeth of people that you can actually see in the distance. Midnight pushing obscene katamari. Midnight pushing obscene katamari. Is that a video game? Is that Katamari a video game? Sorry, I've got to just check what that is. What is Katamari? I think it is a video game. Katamari is a Japanese video game franchise. Okay, so that just made sense, because when I saw Katamari versus Little One, when I just saw the verses, I knew it had something to do with a video game. And it's like old me and what army. So I like that he's playing into that, because we used to say that, you know, as kids, where it's like I'm gonna beat you up, bro, or I'm gonna beat you, and then the response would be you and what army. But then also playing into the nightlife in terms of like you feel kind of vulnerable. You kind of feel vulnerable on the streets, right? Where you're alone, and it's kind of like you're in this video game and you don't really have no army if something ought to happen. So I kind of think like he's playing into the video game and into the nightlife, and kind of saying he's trying to tie it all together. So he's trying to tie in the anime, right, and the comic book, and he's trying to tie in the how things are happening on the streets. It all feels like a video game, and he's trying to tie himself into that as well, right? So, and then Loser Weeper in the hours. So isn't this Loser Weeper in the wee hours speaking to Moo in the ether? So Loser Weeper, it's kind of like, if you lose, you weep. What did they used to say as a kid? Losers, weepers, or something like that. Something like that. That's how kids used to speak at the time. I can see him on earth tone, low hat, and throwback shoes like Guess Who at Easter. I think he's just describing something. He's just describing something. Speaking to Moo in the ether. I can see him in earth tone. Oh, you see, this is how he tries to play the video game. So I can see you like in actual earth tone, not in the video game tone, right? In the colors of the video game, I can actually see him in earth tone. This literally feels like a video game in real life, with the low hat is obviously the character of the thing. So he's kind of trying to attribute a certain characteristic from a video game to somebody that he sees with the hat that's the low hat, essentially. I can see him in the earth tone. A throwback shoes like Guess Who at Easter. Not entirely sure about that. I can bounce ideas off an angel or demon. I see over here, I'm not entirely sure if he's talking about like sort of like a Ouija board or somebody who can speak to spirits, essentially, right? That is literally sitting there on the street. I can bounce ideas off an angel or demon, or any other brand of Synthulu. Now, Synthulu, sorry, I've never been able to pronounce it correctly. If I'm not mistaken, that is a name from a Dr. Zeus book, and don't ask me why I actually know that. I know that because literally my son just got the full edition of the old school Dr. Zeus book, and I was actually going through all of them, and I remember that particular name, and I think it's an octopus. It's an octopus with like the tentacles, or any other brand of Cthulhu. So it's kind of like I can bounce an idea off an angel and demon, and then that's kind of like putting your fingers over the Ouija board. It's another way of actually saying that you're putting your fingers over a Ouija board. It's kind of like an octopus, essentially, over the Ouija board. I can rinse in the ambient wind, right? But I can't relate to the intangibles to you. So he's basically saying I can rinse in the ambient wind, in terms of like, he can sort of like rinse amongst this, but he can't sort of relate to it, right? He can't relate to any of this. It's like this isn't his life. His life was actually a little bit more sort of like stable and less darker, right? And then when he says here in the chorus, crystals in the hammer, in the handle of my hammer to the anvil light. I'm not entirely sure what he means by that, but I kind of feel like he's trying to say that he has like a greater sort of superpower. It's almost like almost like he's a blacksmith, essentially, and he's been given some sort of power to sort of mold his future in a certain way. So crystal's in the handle of my hammer, meaning that he's actually, the skill that he's acquired comes from a power that was God-given, right, which is obviously his lyrical abilities, essentially, and then he's actually the way he plays into the whole blacksmith in terms of beating the anvil, you beating steel in the anvil, is he's actually making something. He's forging something out of nothing, essentially. But now when playing that up against the city and playing that up against those in the city that look like, life has treated them hard, right? That they don't have much in terms of prospects and things like that. And it's just because, not that they don't have the talent, it's just because those talents weren't really nurtured. They didn't come from homes that cared, or they came from homes that didn't have a parent, or they didn't have the amenities, or they didn't have the money, essentially, right? So he's basically saying that he is blessed to have what he has, because I've got the crystals in the handle of my hammer to the anvil, which means that I can forge my way because I had a family that cared. I had a family that at least gave me an education so that I can hone my skills, and now I can mold my future on the anvil. I think he's playing into that. I'm not entirely sure. That's at least my thinking there. Anyway, carrying on. Let's go.
Crystals in the handle of my hammer to the anvil like.
I like that line.
Crystals in the handle of my hammer to the anvil like. Crystals in the handle of my hammer to the anvil like.
Okay, now we're going to the third verse.
I walk the city strictly witching hours.
So quickly, I'm not entirely sure who is this guy. I don't know who this is. Obviously, this sounds like somebody different in this particular one.
I walk the city strictly witching hours. Feeling dangerous, feeling like I gave you power. Trees rustling, they sleep, wildlife scurry to feed. It's a light on in the tower. Shadows moving, the deep smile, rows of redundant teeth. They can see you's a coward. Street lamps is buoys and oceans of black. I'm swimming on my back, the moon but a yellow piece of crack in the firmament. Peer into the dark.
You see, this over here, I kind of feel like they were friends. I kind of feel like this dude who's rapping over here and Aesop Rock were friends, but they came from two different households, two different lives, right? And they had two very different upbringings, essentially. But they saw the streets very differently, right? Aesop saw the streets in one way, and this kid saw the streets in a different way. And I feel like this kid saw the streets in a bit more of a dire. He saw the streets that were a little bit more dire, although it was the same city grid. But some blocks were worse than others. I kind of feel that that's what they're playing in, what he's playing into. But anyway, carry on.
Peer into the dark, Copernicus. Fellow travelers past tense, wondering if it's all turning the tournament. Every morning on the steps with my little herb. Every morning a mad woman come through feeding the birds. Walking crazy fast, tossing fistfuls of bread. Might as well be feeding the rats, but the rats already well fed. Fentanyl in the pack, if they could, they'd come back from the dead and buy it again. I remember when nights was ambulance sirens, watching them put bodies inside them. Sometimes somebody outside wilding on empty streets, dead silent, half empty stores scared to breathe. I sit on steps now with my little weed. I walk the long way around the jacks, them brothers looking a little lean. I'm taciturn on the strip, I get my shit turned and I leave. Pachyderm, I never forget the faces of thieves. Head full of worms, some days it's bees. Some mornings the air feels clean. I can see her coming, trundling down the block. Then stop, pick the dead bird off the curb, stuffed it in her bag. Teeth barely bared when she hurried past.
Okay, so it's basically what I was saying over here is that I kind of feel like they were friends, right? And that's why they're literally on the track together. It literally comes off the sort of chorus over there. It comes off that hook where it's crystals in the handle of my hammer to the anvil, like is kind of, Aesop saying, I was actually blessed. I was blessed with something, that I was blessed to not only have that skill, because his friend over here has the same skill, right? But as a kid, he was able to sort of hone in it. It was easier for him because, he had a more stable upbringing, where this last verse sounds like it was a lot more dire. All right. So anyway, let's just go into this over here. This is the last verse. I walk the city strictly witching hours. Right. I like that. So it's kind of like already over there. He's painting like the darkness of it, the witching hours, right, where the witches come out. Essentially, feeling dangerous, feeling like I gave you power. Trees rustle in their sleep. Wildlife scurry to feed. Right, I like the way he's painting that. So he's painting this ominous, sort of like very dark thing. It almost sounds like he's walking through a cemetery to a certain degree, right? And then trees are rustling in the wind, and wildlife sort of scurry out to actually get little scraps of something, right? But not even that. It kind of also plays into wildlife being the actual animals itself, and actually the poor people as well that don't have anything, right? That come out and beg as well. I think he's playing into both of those. It's a light it's a light on in the tower, shadows move in the D, smile, rows of redundant teeth. That's fucking cool. So I think he's literally just talking about like just people in buildings, right? And then you can actually just, it's like you can see their teeth in the rows of redundant teeth, meaning like those people don't really mean anything, not to him and not to like sort of the politicians at large. I think he's playing into that. They can see you's a coward. So obviously these are like sort of dangerous people. They can see that, you don't really want any trouble because, you're not one of those guys. You're not one of the thugs, essentially. Street lamps is boys in ocean of black. Fucking cool. Very descriptive way of actually saying that. It's just completely pitch black and those street lamps look like boys. But what I like about the way he says street lamps like boys in the ocean black, there's the only thing that kind of saves him are the fucking street lamps. Like the fact that there's light, because the moment he slips into darkness, something's going to come out of that darkness, right? He's going to get caught by the night, essentially. So it's almost kind of trying to paint a picture that he's feeling quite insecure and vulnerable, right? And like you want to stay where the lights are so that people can actually see you, essentially, because the moment you go down a dark alley, God knows, you don't have a boy there anymore, like a boy to save you anymore. Then you are literally in the deep and you don't know what you're going to get, right? You don't know what's going to bite you. It feels like you're drowning in the deep, dark ocean with no life buoy. Very clever fucking writing there. Very, very, very cool. The moon, but a yellow piece of crack in the firmament. Very cool. I like that. So the moon, but a yellow piece of crack. So I kind of feel like it's a full moon. It's actually probably like a quarter or half moon, something like that. Peer into the dark. Copernicus. Copernicus was an astrologer. Very nice way of the thing. I think actually Copernicus was the guy who said that the Earth revolves around the sun, and not the sun around the Earth, or something like that. I think that's what he that was his theory, essentially. But he's an astrologer. Peer into the dark Copernicus. Very clever, right? It's just basically saying the dark sky. Fellow travelers, past tense. Right, that's very cool, because now he's sort of playing fellow travelers in terms of like people who have died and moved on, right? Moved on to the abyss, they moved on to the universe as energy, but then he's also talking about the fellow travelers that are passing him by, essentially. I think he's just playing into both those meanings. Wondering if it's our own turn in the tournament. That's very fucking cool. So I kind of almost feel like he's playing this almost like a gauntlet, right? And you're the gladiator. So wondering if it's your turn now to go through this gauntlet, and who knows if you'll make it on the other side, essentially. Will you be saved by the boys of light, or will you be cast out into the Copernicus, into the actual the heavens, essentially, meaning you'll die, essentially, because so he's really trying to paint that his side of the city, his side of this grid was a lot darker and more dire than this Aesop side. So I think it's a nice sort of juxtaposition in terms of their two different lives, and yet they come from two different lives, two different backgrounds, two different struggles, right? They sort of met. There was something that connected them from a human sense as well, right? Let me just carry on. Where was the moon yellow piece of crack and firmament? We've done that. Peer into the dark Copernicus. Fellow travelers past tense, wondering if it's our turn in the tournament. Every morning on the steps with my little herb. Okay, so he's obviously just sitting out on the steps with his weed. Every morning a mad woman come through feeding the birds. So he's just literally describing his environment. Walking crazy fast, tossing fistfuls of bread. Might as well feeding the rats, but the rat's already well fed. Do you know what I mean? That's very cool. In terms of the way he's playing with the rats, he could be playing into the rats themselves, but then also the rats in terms of like the human rats at night that go out and sort of just cause mayhem and sell drugs and things like that. So the rat's already well fed, meaning that the rats have made, they came out and they got their cheddar, essentially, right, for selling drugs, because he ties that back into drugs shortly, I think. Walking crazy fast, tossing fistfuls of bread, might as well be feeding the rats, but the rats already well fed. Fentanyl in the pack, if they could see, he ties it back into the actual selling of drugs, right? So the rats are really well fed, meaning that, he could also be playing into the people that are actually on that fentanyl, that they're actually acting like rats, right? And scurrying around because they're high on fentanyl. Or you could be talking about the actual drug dealers and they got their cheddar from selling drugs in the middle of the night, essentially. If they could, they'd come back from the dead, right? Well, obviously fentanyl, the likelihood of fentanyl killing you is almost fucking 95%. It's actually fucking crazy. It's a mad fucking drug. But back from the dead. But again, I remembered when the nights with ambulance sirens, obviously, so he's painting a really dire situation in terms of overdoses, in terms of gangs, in terms of all that kind of thing. So very different picture that he's painting over here to Aesop's verse over here, right? And somehow I kind of feel that there's a connection between the two, I think, right? Anyway, an empty street. I remember the night when ambulance sirens watching him put bodies inside him, putting bodies obviously inside body bags. Sometimes somebody outside willing or whiling on empty streets, dead silence. Half empty stores, scared to breathe. I sit on the steps with my little weed. Half empty stores, scared to breathe. Right, so obviously it just shows that it's just they're scared to breathe in terms of like they don't really want to be robbed to a certain degree, right? They're scared to breathe in terms of like they're scared to keep their doors open because if they do, they'll get robbed inside. So essentially, they keep everything locked up. Essentially, I think that's what he's trying to depict over here. On empty streets, dead silent, half empty stores, scared to breathe. I sit on my step with my little weed, so everything's closed. Half empty stores, scared to breathe is basically saying everything is shut, everything's closed. He's just sitting on the steps in the early morning and smoking his weed. I walk the long way around the Jects. I'm not entirely sure if he's just talking about a particular block or something like that. Then Brothers is looking a little lean, obviously, so that firstly, they're drug addicts, and secondly, they haven't gotten enough to eat, right? And he's basically saying brothers in terms of like it's his people, it's his kind, right? Which is kind of devastating to see. It's like my own people, my own kind, right? Looking lean, like they haven't been fed and they're malnourished, and they're trying to sort of they're trying any vice to sort of numb themselves from the world around them, and he's seeing this in real time. Pachyderm, I never forget the faces of thieves. Fire, I like the way he's actually said that, right? And when he says faces of thieves, he's not entirely trying to say that these are bad people. It's just they do what they have to do to survive because they're desperate, essentially, right? So, and that's kind of feel sorry for them. It's not like they're actual thieves just to be malevolent or just to be dangerous. Or just to steal, but they do what they have to do to survive. Desperation can bring a man to do anything, right? And then head full of worms, some days it's bees. I like that over there. So head full of worms, meaning that I'm not entirely sure if he's talking about his head or the head of those people, essentially, where it's kind of like worms, which are like sort of digging holes into the brain, kind of playing into the drugs, right? So it's like the drugs sort of like digging holes into their brain, or sometimes like bees where it's actually stinging their brain. It's actually painful, which means actually it's a very, very cool way of saying that when they have When they're on the drugs is literally eating away at their brain like worms, right? And when they don't have the drugs, they have that withdrawal symptom, which feels like just multiple bee stings, which is like, that's how painful it gets because of I think that's actually what he's trying to say. And it's a very clever way of saying it, all right? So, very head full of worms or some days of bees, which means that sometimes they can't get the drugs, and then that withdrawal symptoms literally feels like it's just a death by a million bee stings, essentially. And then when they're on the drugs, it's just eating away at their brain. Fire, very clever. Some mornings the air feels clean. I can see her come. So over here, he's kind of playing into the hopefulness over here. Some mornings he can see the light. Some mornings it feels like things could get better. Right, so at least he's playing into the hopefulness of that with that line over there. I can see her coming, trundling down the block, then stopped, picked up a dead bird. This could be the same exact person who kept feeding the birds bread, right? Stopped, picked up the dead bird off the curb, stuffed it in her bag, teeth barely barred when she hurried past. Right? So over here, it almost feels like either she's trying to save this bird in terms of like maybe that's just how the streets are. Everyone's just in a situation where everyone's trying to save themselves or people trying to save. It's just very dire at the end of the day. Or it's this person who like sort of picks up the scraps because all there is scraps in the street, right? I think it could be that. And then hurry past because needs to go and do something, or you know what I mean, like it's almost like that situation of like don't waste anything, even like a living carcass or a dead carcass essentially. And that's how dire those streets were, right? So again, the juxtaposition between this and Aesop's first verse, and I think this is actually why Aesop has one sort of hook over here. And he repeats the same line, crystal in the handle of my hammer. So it's like he was given a superpower that many weren't, right? And that superpower came from his upbringing, an upbringing that his mate, even though they were mates, he could see didn't have, right? So it's kind of him, it's his gratitude for the life that he's got, and him also kind of feeling sorry for, you know, for those who don't have. And I think it plays, I think there might be, I'm not sure, there might be friends, there might not be friends, but at least like that, that's at least what I got from that. I said in the beginning, it doesn't sound too cryptic, but it actually was a little bit cryptic. I think it was more descriptive. I don't think it was as cryptic as the other ones. I think it was just more poetically descriptive, right? And there was a lot in here, right? There was a lot of deep meaning in here, and a lot of reminiscing, and a lot of sort of nostalgia being played into here. And I think the way they wrote this offers the nuances to the two different worlds that they came from in the way it's written. You guys let me know if you agree or disagree. How long was this reaction? 50 minutes, man. Seriously, these things are always fucking 50 minutes to an hour. Anyway, you guys let me know what you think down below. I'll catch you on the very next one. Peace.